Thank you very much, Melissa, for such great presentation. All right, let's go to Uzi. Avner. Good morning, Uzi.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Oh. What happened?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can see it. I don't know if that's the first slide. Just check it.
Oh, wait a second.
Yeah, that's why.
Sorry for that.
No problem. All right, that's it. You can start.
I hope you see the title. I don't.
Yes, yes.
Anyway,
we can.
What I'm trying to show you is a very cruel abbreviation of a broad subject. So please excuse me if I exceed the speed limit. First of all, the desert is extremely rich with calcites. All the numbers that you see here are temporary. They are changing constantly. And this despite that half of the Negev has never been surveyed systematically by archaeological survey. So you can get the idea of many calcites. I'll show you only a few types, beginning with standing stones. These are actually the earliest in the Near East, maybe even in the world. This one was explained by the excavator, Don Henry, as deliberately shaped as follows. This one from Har Harif is unshaped, and this is actually the rule with most of those of the coming periods, which are thousands of standing stones, which are unshaped. In addition, from the beginning, the ancients distinguished between narrow stones and broad stones. We shall address this later. Based on this distinction, we can also define quite a few types in each repeating number. Here you have a few examples of different pairs, different trios, different groups of 5, groups of 7, and 9. These are the repeating numbers. So the question is, what do these stones mean to us? First hint is while excavating these shrines, we find the cultic elements like a platform of seven stones with good parallels in 2 locations in Ein Razal in Jordan. This is a sunken altar, a basin, a grinding bowl, and others. All kinds of artifacts which were brought as offerings, hinting to some cultic meaning. In addition, we have many written sources in the Near East. Here you have only a small example of 5 sources. The bottom line is that the stones were perceived as containing inside them the spirit and power of deities. By this, they actually resemble statues of gods set in temples, but in one point, they are even the opposite of the statues because they are unshaped. And this is actually a principle which is eloquently expressed in the Exodus 2. If you make for me an altar of stones, do not build it of hewn stones, for if you use a chisel upon it, you profane it. It means that the complete stone is sacred, and this is why the altars and the temple itself in Jerusalem were supposed to be built by complete stones. And this is actually the base for the second commandment, prohibiting images. Here you see an unupdated table of types of groups of standing stones. Matzebot. Matzebot is a Hebrew biblical word, but used also in non-Hebrew literature. This one is based on 210 sites out of about 500 that recorded to date. But you can see some repetition. And the repetition in each form means that nothing is accidental, but there is a purpose behind it. In addition, these repeating numbers, 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 9, are all groups of deities known from mythological stories from the Near East in later periods, from dedication inscriptions, and mainly from art. We shall see one example. First of all, here is one shrine. The right side stone was found tilted backward, but all others in place. You see here an order, broad, narrow, broad, etc. So the distinction between the two forms is very consistent. What does it mean? Broad stones most probably represent female deities. Narrow stones represent male. There are many indications for this distinction, but one later source of Ibn al-Kalbi, 9th century BC, said that the goddess Eilat was the cubic stone, while the god Side was a long rock. And there are other indications. With this distinction, we can approach the groups of stones, actually all of them, and ask them, who are you? I'll show you only one example, which is this, a trio quite popular in the desert in all periods. You see here, 7000 BC, Nabatean, early Islamic that Steve was then showed before. And there are many other examples of all periods from this group. Also, other groups are consistent all along the millennia. What we see here is the broad stone in the center with two smaller ones flanking. Based on art, we can decipher them like. Here we see two ivory plaques from Ugarit with a goddess nursing two young gods and a goddess feeding two ibexes, which represent the young gods. Here, three examples from late bronze pottery decoration from Lachish, Megiddo, Lachish, with a tree or pubic triangle. All of them represent the fertility goddess flanked by two ibexes. Other examples, there are several stelae in Egypt like this, with Canaanian and Egyptian gods. This is the Canaanian Kudshu, this is the Egyptian Min, and this is the Canaanian Reshef. So she is standing in the center. Here, a later example from the time of Augustus in Rome. Rome as a woman or Venus, there are different interpretations, with Remus and Remulus, also with the same arrangement. And here, quite funny, from a manuscript from Italy of the 12th century AD, Sophia Sapientia is nursing two monks, and all these are figurative representation of the mute stones that we see here. This is how a very brief example how we can decipher like the groups of stones. There are also other sites with many stones. Here, originally only 12 were still standing. Others are restored after excavation. The time is mid-5th millennium BC. We have two stones for deities, and the others are for ancestors. We know of ancestral standing stones a lot from anthropological studies, but also from ancient written sources. One example from the story of Akkad from Ugarit, speaking of Sakan, which is Matzeva, a standing stone, for El Ab, God Father, which is ancestor. Now, some brief summary of the standing stones. The earliest matzevot known to date in the world are from the desert. During the 8th to 3rd millennia BC, the desert matzevot greatly outnumbered those of the fertile Near East. In the Negev, about 500. In the fertile zones of the Near East, about 55, which means 10,000 more. But the Negev, only this is less than 1% of the area of the Near East. So those of the desert are much outnumbering the others. Worship of matzevot, standing stones, persisted in the desert longer than in the rest of the Near East. Matzevot represent an anachronic representation of God, a theological principle common to the desert religions, which is the prehistoric desert, the Israelite religion, the Nabatean religion, and the Islam. All of them with desert roots. What does it all mean? It may mean that matzevot were originally desert cultural element that later adopted by the fertile societies. It may mean that the humble desert inhabitants, inferior in material culture, had the power to influence the more sophisticated sedentary people in the realm of spiritual culture. The many types of repeated groups of matzevot attest to a complex hierarchical pantheon, the complex mythology, earlier than expected. We'll see later why. We jump quickly to open-air sanctuaries. These are very simple, low, modest structures, but with a lot of interest. I will be able to show you only very little from the symbolic meanings of the sanctuaries. Here we see a non-updated table of the types based on 154 out of 234 that recorded to date. They contain standing stone, single, pairs, trios, different kinds of basins, all kinds of goods which are typical for cult sites. C14 dates indicate 6th and 5th millennia BC, but also in some of them we find flint of the early Neolithic, which is the 8th and 7th millennia BC. In others, we find later finds until the beginning of the 2nd millennium BC. In road junctions, we found a cluster of sanctuaries. This is Jebel Hashem el Taref. You can see on the map where it is on the road junction. And here on the mountains, on the mountain top, we have 22 large tumuli tombs. And at the foot of the mountain, 33 open-air sanctuaries. 10 of them are arranged in pairs. This is one example of a pair. And this is how it looks like in a ground plan. Today we know 26 pairs like this, all of them in the same pattern. It means that they have some symbolic meaning, which I will not be able to explain much, but one thing is that they are very similar to a popular pair of standing stone in the desert, in which the left side in our view is larger and the right side is smaller, as we see here, very typical. It is also similar to the way most of the pairs of gods and kings and nobles are described in the art in the ancient Near East, where the male is on their right side and the woman is on his left, just as it said twice in Song of Songs, his left arm is out on my neck and his right hand hugs me. Try it. One brief point. Here you see the ground plan of 11 Chalcolithic and early bronze temples, built temples in the Levant. They all share 6 specific characteristics with the desert ones. However, all these are later than these ones by 2 or 3 millennia. So here again, we see a movement of ideas from the desert to the stoneland. We have also trios of open-air sanctuaries, also trios of circular ones, pairs and trios of circular ones, which are identified as representing goddesses, like these ones, like trios of broad stones, like triple spirals found in different places in the world, and so forth. In some of the open sanctuaries, we have geoglyphs or stone drawings. In this case, in Uvda Valley, 15 she leopards, I cannot explain now why, all facing east to the rising sun, and one headless oryx facing west. So there is a mythological story, here's a hint for a mythological story dealing with life and death. Some examples from Jebel Hashem al-Taref, 3 examples out of 10. And this one that Steve showed already from the excavation of Fuji in Auja, southern Jordan. Some points of the open-air sanctuaries. Open-air sanctuaries are low, simple structure, but rich in symbolism and the Cultic content. I could show only very little of it. Desert open sanctuaries contain characteristics which are also appeared in the built temples of the fertile lands 2 or 3 millennia later. A single sanctuary may contain up to 400 people during a ceremony. A cluster up to 10,000 people, which is much more than any estimated population in their vicinity. What does it mean? For example, it means a pilgrimage to cult sites in the desert already by the 8th or 7th millennia BC. The attractiveness of the desert for cultic activity begins so early. We have later examples that you surely know. We jump quickly to burial. This is part of a burial site in Eilat, excavated long ago, but here it is restored, moved and restored out of a neighborhood which was supposed to be built on top. This is one tomb with a pair of broad stones representing a pair of goddesses that protecting the tomb with a purpose. 4 tombs have pairs of broad stones like this, and also standing stones for the ancestors found as you see them. And here some other pictures of the same tomb. Despite all the tombs were robbed in the antiquity, we had many finds that can be analyzed, but also one special element, a remnant of a tree trunk of a juniper brought from the Edomite mountains, quite a long distance, and originally it was put to the above surface to represent the tree goddess, the Asherah of the Ugaritic text and the Bible. And here, one of 2 open-air sanctuaries with a forest of small standing stones, 2 for deities and others for the ancestors. In this site, we could identify a whole list of innovations in burial customs, and also a whole vocabulary of life and fertility symbols, mainly female fertility, but also one male symbol that I could not show. But the question is, what does it all mean? My suggestion is that the combination of both of these indicate a new perception, a new and actually vanguard perception of life and death, which is cyclical against the linear, which was common in the world before and even later. If we put together all the sites, all the C14 dated sites that we have, which are not so many, we see a cluster in the 6th and 5th millennia BC. In the past, I tried to explain this kind of explosion of cult site in the desert following the introduction of agriculture and herding into the desert. It was quite convenient explanation, but did not hold. Why not? Because of these sites. These are called rhododian sites, which are early and late mountain Neolithic cult sites that today we surveyed 386 in the southern Negev, but these tend to get only 17 habitation sites in the entire Negev. So you see many more cult sites than habitations. And they contain, first of all the arrangement of standing stone that we saw before, the same numbers, the same forms, and many other stone objects which are quite intriguing. Each one deserves a lecture, but not now. In one site that we excavated, we found close to 1,000 raptor bones, and only raptor bones of 11 species. The most dominant are the black kite and the honey buzzard. 4 C14 dates from the site. These are from the very top of a huge ash spot, 6 meters in diameter at least, and we don't know the depth yet, but from the top we have about 7,000 BC. From a depth of 20 centimeters, we have 7,200 BC, but with the OSL date, we go back to the mid-8th millennium BC. Now, if you look again at this chart, we see that actually most of the phenomena that we spoke about before begin actually here. This means before the introduction of agriculture and the herding into the desert. So, to sum up, the desert is highly rich with the cult sites of many different types, as we saw before. It seems like that fewer people in the desert actually built many more cult sites, although modest, than those of the fertile zones. Desert people appear as highly active, creative, and innovating religiously with all what we saw, even having the power to influence the settled Near East. By about 7,000 BC, the desert religion appears as well-established, consistent numbers of matzevot, etc., all what we saw. All these attest to the complex pantheon and complex mythology, while in the rest of the Near East, complex pantheon actually appeared only with the rise of the hierarchic urban societies about 3000 BC. Now, a question. How could simple egalitarian desert societies imagine complex hierarchic pantheons several millennia before the urban societies? Another question. If not because of the introduction of farming and herding, what actually prompted the cult eruption in the desert in the 8th millennium BC? Honestly, I have no answers. Until now, all my attempts to interview the ancients failed. So if any one of you have any suggestion, I'll be happy to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uzi. You can, all right.